When spring comes again. Seoul was colder than she expected. The wind curled around Ziora Nwando like a living thing, slipping past her flannel shirt and biting at her skin. She had packed her jacket in her suitcase and has not bothered to get it out now. She adjusted the vibrant peach floral scarf around her neck and stepped out of Incheon Airport, dragging a navy blue suitcase plastered with stickers from Lagos, Nairobi, and Paris. The city towered before her, steel and glass and snow-dusted mountains in the distance, bathed in the soft gray blush of a winter morning. Ziora was 24 and unflinching. Her skin gleamed like polished bronze, and her eyes held the fire of someone who had been told no too many times to accept it as an answer anymore. A mass of coiled curls framed her oval face, pinned back just enough to reveal a pair of gold and silver star earrings, a gift from her grandmother. Her fashion sense was as unapologetic as her presence. She pictured herself in a red dress with a little white and gold embroidery, the design she had sketched during her flight. She smiled. She'd arrived in Seoul not just to visit but to conquer. Winning the Zenith Global Design Competition had earned her an elite 6-month residency at Maison K, one of Korea's most prestigious design houses. It was a career-defining opportunity. And yet, as her cab weaved through Gangnam's endless neon, a knot twisted in her stomach. The apartment arranged for her was nestled in Hanam-dongga neighborhood, known for its quiet elegance and embassies. Her place was minimalist but warm, with light wood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a small terrace overlooking the frozen Han River. She set down her bags and stood still for a moment, absorbing the silence. It felt hollow. If it were her younger sister Ife, she would have already unpacked by now, humming Afro beats and calling their mom to say she had landed safely. Instead, Ziora unpacked in silence. Her sketchbooks were the first thing she placed on the shelf, then a framed photo of her parents and another of her entire family. Finally, she set a small carved figurine of an elegant woman in a couture outfit by the windowsill, a quiet reminder of why she was here. Deciding on getting some rest and recovering from jet lag before her first business event, she resisted the temptation to begin exploring the city. The gala at Maison K came 2 days later. Ziora stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the sleeves of her asymmetrical fusion dress, a bold design that blended West African motifs with hanbok-inspired pleats. She'd dyed the fabric herself. It shimmered like dusk, red, white, and flickers of gold. The event was a whirl of polished elites, flashing cameras, and soft jazz echoing off marble. The gallery space had been transformed into a dreamscape of glass orchids and floating silk lanterns. She barely had time to breathe before being swept into introductions. "Ah, Miss Nwando, allow me to introduce our guests of honor." She turned and came face to face with him, Seo Min-jae. He was taller than she'd imagined. Lean, impossibly poised in a tailored charcoal suit. His features were sharp and composed, like he'd been sculpted from ice and shadows. His jet-black hair was slicked back, revealing an angular jaw and eyes so dark they looked like ink spilled on snow. Korea's crown jewel, actor, painter, recluse. A man whose face had sold more watches and whiskey than most brands could count. He didn't smile. Ziora didn't flinch. "Miss Nwando," he said curtly, offering a nod. "Mr. Seo," she returned, equally clipped. Their handshake lasted precisely 1 second. As fate would have it, they were placed at the same presentation circle. The moment turned tense when she accidentally brushed too close to him while reaching for her tablet, and her elbow caught his sleeves, nagging the fabric of his custom-made hanbok jacket. A long, jagged tear ran from shoulder to wrist. Gasps erupted. Flashbulbs went off. Ziora froze. Min-jae turned sharply, inspecting the damage. "This was hand-stitched. And this was an accident," she snapped, regaining composure. An assistant rushed over with apologies. Ziora stepped back, flushed with frustration and humiliation. "You know how many people would kill to meet me tonight?" Min-jae said, deadpan. She looked him square in the eye. "Congratulations. That's 2 people I'm not." Mr. Seo's assistant arrives and whispers something to Mr. Seo, who gives Ziora a quick nod before turning and walking away. Hours later, Ziora escaped into the cold night air, storming past the garden courtyard behind the venue. Her breath formed ghosts in the dark. She kicked off her heels and sank onto a stone bench, sketchbook in lap, drawing feverishly. Min-jae found her there. He approached in silence, curiosity etched across his guarded face. "You're still here," he said quietly. "Didn't get the memo to vanish after public disgrace," she replied without looking up. He stepped closer, watching her hand move across the page. A hanbok design reimagined with sweeping African curves. "You're good," he admitted. "I know." A beat passed. "What are you so sure of?" he asked. She finally looked at him, eyes steady. "That something beautiful is coming." For the first time, his lips quirked in a faint smile. It didn't reach his eyes, but it cracked the ice. They didn't know it yet, but that night under frostbitten lanterns and unfinished sketches, they had already stepped into a story bigger than either of them imagined. And spring, though still distant, had already begun to stir beneath the snow. It had been just 6 weeks since Yor Nwando first arrived in Seoul the night she'd accidentally ruined a famous actor's hanbok at a gala she almost didn't attend. 6 weeks since her brush with stardom and chaos turned into something stranger, warmer, and far more intoxicating. What began as a fashion disaster had blossomed into a secret world, one built on shared glances, whispered promises, and quiet corners of a city that never really slept. Ziora often found herself awake long past midnight, not sketching in her journal like she used to, but thinking of Seo Min-jae. His face, the way he looked when he forgot the camera was watching, the small smirk he gave when something amused him, the flicker of realness he reserved only for her. The Seoul skyline glittered outside her window, but it was the memories of stolen hours that lit her up from within. They had been sneaking around the city like rebellious teenagers with too much to lose, ducking into side streets, shielding their faces with hats and masks, texting in coded emojis. Seoul became their playground. Ziora introduced Min-jae to roadside tteokbokki vendors and corner ramen stalls. He took her to an obscure art museum where he admitted, for the first time, that he used to paint before the fame made him afraid to make mistakes. "Paint with me," she whispered one night as they stood before a wall, sized abstract. "Not for the world, just for us." Min-jae hesitated, then reached for her hand. "Only if you sketch next to me." They sat side by side in his hidden studio later that night, paintbrush and pencil, color and line, silence and spark. He painted her laugh. She sketched his hands. The pieces didn't make sense alone, but together they told a story no one else could read. But even in the bubble of their growing intimacy, shadows crept in. His agency had begun to notice his absences. There were rumors, quiet questions. When a nosy assistant spotted a strand of Ziora's purple thread on Min-jae's jacket, the fashion house director summoned her. "You are talented," the director said coldly, "but you are also replaceable. Don't let personal distractions ruin your contract." Ziora walked out of the meeting with a fake smile and a trembling hand. That night she told Min-jae. "They're warning me," she said, "telling me not to be seen with you." He looked away. "They've started watching me too." "So what now?" she whispered. "Do we become strangers again?" His silence was an answer, but then he shook his head fiercely. "No, we find a way they can't take from us." That weekend, under the hush of snowfall outside the city, they registered their marriage at a local district office in Gyeonggi-do quietly, legally, with the help of a bilingual friend who signed as their witness, although Min-jae also spoke fluent English. The process was brief but binding. No gowns, no flowers, just official paperwork and a simple exchange of silver bands. Later, they visited a tiny Christian chapel tucked in a hillside village. The pastor welcomed them kindly, reading from 1 Corinthians about love that endures all things. Their vows were whispered beneath stained glass and candlelight, with only the Lord and the cross above them as witnesses. "I vow to fight for you," Min-jae said, his voice cracking. "Even when I'm afraid." "I vow to never let the world define us," Ziora answered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Even when it's easier to hide." They kissed beneath wind chimes and winter silence. No fanfare, no audience. Only God, their faith, and the sound of their promises etched into time. But life outside the chapel did not pause for love. Their secret marriage became an island. Ziora returned to long design hours and cold glares from her superiors. Min-jae was swept back into drama shoots and relentless interviews. The few nights they managed to see each other became quieter longing in their eyes, exhaustion in their bones. Then came the photo. A blurry tabloid shot barely discernible, but to those who looked closely, it was clear it was Min-jae and her, walking side by side at dusk. The agency exploded. He was summoned, threatened, given a script to recite if asked. You're not dating her, you are helping a colleague, she's not your type. You're focused on your career. Min-jae's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Ziora found out 2 hours later when his publicist released a statement denying any romantic connection. She stormed into his apartment. So that's it, she cried. You erased me? I didn't write that, he said, eyes haunted. They gave me no choice. I'm trying to protect you. By pretending I don't exist? He reached for her. Just wait. Please, just wait until the right time. I'll fix it. Ziora backed away. You're already fading, Min-jae. From me, from us. He didn't chase her that night. He just stood in the doorway, watching her disappear. 2 weeks later, she collapsed at her studio after a dizzy spell. Her assistant rushed her to the hospital. She thought it was stress. The doctor smiled softly. You're pregnant. With twins. Ziora sat in silence. The city outside buzzed and blurred. Min-jae's voice echoed in her memory like he was right there. Just wait until the right time. But time had already moved on. She clutched the ultrasound in her hand, alone, and made a decision. She would go back to Nigeria, where she would no longer have to hide, where she could raise her children with the love and truth they deserved even if their father would never know their names. What Ziora didn't know was that she wasn't the only one breaking. She was gone. He stared at the door for hours after she left, half expecting her to turn back. She didn't. He didn't blame her. How could he? He'd let them erase her, let fear dictate his silence. But no press release could undo what was real. No agency could rewrite the memory of their vows or the night she'd fallen asleep in his arms after whispering that he made Seoul feel like home. Min-jae sat on the floor of his apartment, her purple thread still curled on his jacket. The couch still smelled like her shampoo. Every corner held a ghost of what he'd lost. He had made a promise, not in a studio, not in an interview, but in a chapel, in the eyes of God. And now, somehow, in the hollow of his chest, he felt it, that something irreversible had happened. And it was his turn to wait. Every sound in the hospital echoed. Twins. She was having twins. She stared at the ultrasound, the twin heartbeats a blur on the screen. She didn't cry. Not then. She just smiled, gently pressing a hand to her flat belly. These are yours too, Min-jae, she whispered, even though he wasn't there. Even though he might never know. She knew he hadn't meant to hurt her. But intentions didn't fix consequences. Ziora looked out at the Seoul skyline one last time, then folded the ultrasound and placed it in her passport case. Her flight to Lagos was in 12 hours. She had said goodbye to him once. Now she would say goodbye to the city that gave her love and nearly broke her, but her heart still whispered his name. Min-jae. It's now 5.5 years since Ziora's departure from Seoul. The air in Lagos was thick with the scent of rain and spices, the city's pulse as vibrant and restless as the world inside Ziora's heart. It had been more than 5 years since she left Korea, almost 6 years since she'd turned her back on a life that had nearly consumed her, and on a love she wasn't sure she could fight for. Back in the bustling heart of Lagos, Ziora had thrown herself into her designs, her work becoming more than just a career, it was her lifeline. Yet no matter how much success she'd achieved, there remained a piece of her, a thread woven into the fabric of her past, that refused to unravel. Leo Jisoo Seonwando and Mia Haeun Seonwando, her twins, will be 5 years old in a few months. Every day they grew more curious, more aware of the world around them, and more inquisitive about the father they had never met. The mornings were the hardest. Ziora often found herself staring out at the skyline from her studio, her thoughts drifting to Seoul, to him, to the secret promise she'd made to herself and to the children she was raising in the shadow of that secret. Her life was colorful and full, yet the absence of one crucial person haunted her every moment. "Mommy, do you think our daddy liked the rain too?" Leo asked one morning, watching the clouds gather outside their apartment window. Ziora had to swallow the sudden lump in her throat. Her son's innocent question struck a chord she didn't know was still there. "I don't know, baby," she replied softly, her voice betraying more emotion than she intended. "But I think he would have loved the rain if it brought him to you." Leo's eyes, bright and filled with wonder, reflected the longing Ziora herself had long buried. Leo was a constant reminder of Min-jae, the way he furrowed his brow when focused, the quiet charm in his smile, Even the way he gripped a pencil and lost himself in a drawing it was all Min-jae. His sister Mia, always the observant one, pressed her nose to the window as the rain began to fall harder. Maybe that's why Mommy draws when it rains, Mia mused quietly. Ziora smiled, her heart swelling with the bittersweet pride only a mother could feel. Yes, the rain was when she allowed herself to feel. When the past wasn't as distant and the future wasn't so uncertain, her children had become her world. The only reminder of him, the only link to that life in Seoul, to the love she couldn't let go of. Yet, as her children grew, so did the questions. They began to notice the little differences in their family, how Mia's laugh resembled someone Ziora couldn't name, how Leo's curiosity matched the way Ziora had once watched him, someone who had always dreamed of things beyond what the world could see. And one day, after a long silence, Mia asked the question that Ziora had dreaded since they were born. Mommy, do you think our daddy misses us? Ziora didn't answer right away. She couldn't. Her chest tightened, the words she longed to say stuck somewhere between her heart and her tongue. She hadn't told them about him yet. She wasn't sure when she would. How could she explain the truth? How could she tell them about a man who might never know they existed, a love story that had faded into the distance? Leo, ever the dreamer, picked up his sketchpad and began to draw, his face focused but pensive. I think he dreams of us, he said. I think we're in his favorite painting. Ziora's eyes stung again, this time with the weight of a secret she had carried for far too long. The thought of Seoul seemed so distant now. A distant, tender ache that Ziora had allowed to settle into the corners of her life, tucked away for fear that it would shatter everything she had built here in Lagos. But Mia's innocent words, and Leo's unspoken belief that they were somehow still connected to him, stirred something deep within her. They had never forgotten him. And now, it seemed, neither could she. It had been years since she'd left Seoul, but when the invitation arrived, it felt like yesterday. An email. A simple one, inviting Ziora to showcase her designs at Seoul Fashion Week headlined for the opening night. The moment she read it, the world around her slowed. She sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. Seoul, the city where she had once fallen in love. The city where she had once found her place in a world that had felt both too small and too overwhelming. The city that had also taken her heart and nearly broken her. Seoul Fashion Week was an incredible honor, an opportunity to showcase her brand on an international stage. She could feel the weight of the decision in her chest, but there was something else. A pull, a memory. The unfinished story of her heart that she hadn't been able to close. It wasn't just about the career. It was about them, about the children she had raised alone, without answers to questions they had never stopped asking. Mia was the first to catch her hesitation. Her big brown eyes studied her mother as Ziora sat silently, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I want to see the place where you fell in love, Mia said, her voice gentle but full of wonder. Leo, always more straightforward, added, and maybe find who's missing from our story. Ziora's heart twisted. She couldn't explain everything to them, not yet. But this was the sign she had been waiting for. A chance to return to Seoul, to face the past, to search for answers for her children, and maybe for herself. Ziora didn't need to think for long, she knew the answer. The moment she booked the tickets, everything felt surreal. A return to the city she had once called home, the city that had witnessed her love for Min-jae and the heartbreak that followed. But now, it was different. She was no longer a young woman chasing her dreams in a foreign city. She was a mother, a woman with her own strength and her own voice. And this time, she wouldn't be running from the past. Seoul had always been more than just a city to Ziora. It was the place where her life had turned upside down. It was where her love story had begun, and it was where she hoped it would find its way back. But she wasn't sure what she would find. Ziora's return to Seoul was an unexpected twist of fate. A call from the prestigious Seoul Fashion Week organizers had shaken her from her quiet life in Lagos, demanding she return to showcase her latest designs, a blend of vibrant African colors and sleek Korean minimalism. It had been years since she left, years since she had sealed her heart away from the man she once loved. But now, the opportunity to present her brand to the world was too significant to decline. She had made a quiet decision when she boarded the plane this time, no looking back. She was no longer that girl in the chapel whispering vows in the dark. She was a woman who had built a life on her own terms, with 2 beautiful children who would never know the weight of secrets. Yet even as the plane descended into Incheon, her heart stirred with emotions she thought she'd buried long ago. The hotel in Gangnam was everything she'd imagined, luxury and anonymity in equal measure. She didn't want to face the old ghosts yet, especially not Min-jae. But the days before the event slipped by quickly, and each time she stepped out into the city, memories of the time they had spent together surged back like a tidal wave. The night before the event, Ziora stood on the rooftop of the hotel, the city lights stretching endlessly before her. She didn't expect to see him, but he was there. Min-jae. She had no idea how he knew she was back in Seoul. His presence wasn't an accident, not with the way he appeared like a shadow from her past, too sudden, too real. But there he was, standing on the balcony next to hers. Ziora had always been an enigma, a woman who had come into his life like a storm, only to disappear without warning. Min-jae's life had been full of noise, media buzz, adoring fans, and constant attention, but beneath it all, he felt an empty ache. The one person he had truly loved had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the echoes of their past. But everything changed when he saw her name. The Seoul Fashion Week organizers had been buzzing with the announcement of a guest designer from Lagos, Ziora Nwando. Min-jae had been scrolling through his phone on a quiet morning, when her name flashed across his screen, along with a picture of her from a past event, her face as radiant as ever. It was like a sharp jolt to his heart. He couldn't breathe for a moment.
He hadn't seen her in years, but the moment he read her name, he knew she was back. But what stunned him more was the revelation that she wasn't alone. Scrolling through the article, he found a single, seemingly innocuous sentence at the bottom of the piece. Ziora will be accompanied by 2 young children, Leo and Mia, who will be attending the event as well. Min-jae's heart stopped. 2 children? His mind raced with a mix of confusion, excitement, and a sharp pang of regret. Had she moved on? Had she built a family without him? It didn't make sense. He tried to remember when they'd last spoken, and the months and years blurred together. But there was something in his gut that told him these were his children. The next day, Min-jae's curiosity took him to the heart of the fashion world. He didn't go as a celebrity, but as a man desperately searching for answers. His first step was to reach out to a mutual friend who worked in the fashion industry, someone who might know where Ziora was staying. The conversation was brief, but enough for him to discover that Ziora had booked a suite at a luxury hotel in Gangnam. There was a fashion event coming up in a few days, and Ziora would be showcasing her latest line there. Min-jae's heart raced. He knew he had to see her, but more than that, he needed to see the children. He arrived at the hotel late one evening, just before the fashion event. Min-jae had planned to keep his distance, to not disrupt her life again, but fate had other plans. As he walked through the hotel lobby, a familiar face caught his eye. Mia. She was sitting on the floor near a large display, quietly sketching something on a piece of paper. He approached her, his heart hammering in his chest, trying to figure out what to say. He kneeled down beside her, and she looked up, her gaze startlingly familiar. "You look like someone I know," she said softly, before turning her attention back to her drawing. Min-jae's breath caught. This was too much. She was too much like him. "Mia," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Mia glanced up again, her dark eyes narrowing as she took him in. "You feel like a dream," she said, as if she had been waiting for him all along. Before Min-jae could respond, Leo appeared, tugging at Mia's sleeve. "Who's that?" Min-jae couldn't help but smile. Leo had a quiet, observant nature, but there was no denying the striking resemblance between them. I'm someone who knows your mother," he said, his voice barely a whisper as looked at Leo. The boy looked just like himself as a kid. It was like he was staring at one of his own pictures from when he was a kid. "Do you like drawing too?" Leo studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I draw pictures of stars." The connection was undeniable. Min-jae had no doubt they were his children. The weight of that knowledge was like a flood, filling him with both joy and regret. Before he could say more, Ziora appeared, her figure as poised as always. But when she saw him with the children, everything in her shifted. Her face became guarded, her lips pressing into a thin line.
"What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice calm but cold. Min-jae swallowed. "I needed to see them. I needed to see you." Ziora's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "You're not part of their lives, Min-jae. You made your choice years ago." As the evening wore on, Ziora and Min-jae had a tense conversation in the hotel's private lounge. He wanted to know everything, how they had gotten here, what had happened in the years since they last saw each other. Ziora, however, was reluctant to open up completely, but Minjae's persistence wore down her walls. I didn't want to come back like this, she told him, her voice raw. I didn't want to disrupt everything you had built. I wanted to protect them from your world, your career, your family, everything that wasn't real. Minjae took a deep breath, his own voice steady. I've changed, Ziora. I'm not that man anymore. I lost myself in the fame, in the expectations. My family, they wanted me to be someone I wasn't. I never chose me. I never chose us. He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. I want to choose us now. I want to be part of their lives. I never stopped loving you and waiting for you. I want to make things right with you, with them. Ziora's face softened, the tears she had been holding back threatening to fall. But can you really do that? Can you walk away from your career, your family's expectations, everything that you've worked for? This isn't just about us anymore, it's about them. And I won't let them be hurt by this. Minjae looked at her with determination. I'm ready to walk away from the fame, from the spotlight, from everything that isn't real. I'll fight for them. I'll fight for you. Ziora hesitated. The past had been full of heartbreak, full of decisions that had torn them apart. But there was something in Minjae's eyes, a depth, a sincerity that made her wonder if he could really do it. Step by step, she whispered. The next day, Minjae met with his family. His parents were furious at his decision to distance himself from the career they had envisioned for him, but he stood firm. I'm not the person you wanted me to be, he told them, his voice calm but resolute. And I'm not the person you think I am. I'm going to be the father my children need, and I'm going to build a life with Ziora step by step. If you can't accept that, then I'll have to live without your approval. His family's reaction was mixed disappointment, anger, and a hint of sadness. But Minjae knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to lose her again, and this time, he wasn't going to let the world stand in his way. At first, Ziora extended her hotel stay. The twins were fascinated with everything: Korean breakfasts, rooftop playgrounds, even the high-tech toilets. Minjae visited them every day, sometimes just to watch them nap, draw, read, and sometimes to walk them to the corner bakery for red bean buns and sweet milk. But Seoul, for all its familiarity, wasn't simple for her. It held shadows, expectations, people who still whispered behind fans when she entered the room. And yet, Minjae never once asked her to stay. He asked what she needed. One evening, they sat on a quiet balcony overlooking the Han River, the twins fast asleep inside. I want them to grow up somewhere they feel they can breathe, Ziora said. Somewhere they're not asked to choose which half of them matters more. Minjae nodded. Then we make a new space, our own. The compromise came softly, like spring rain. They would keep a home in Seoul, Minjae's newly renovated Hanok near Bukhan village, with its paper doors and sun-drenched studio where the kids could paint and Ziora could sew. It would be their base. But each year they would spend time in Lagos. Not for appearances or for escape, but to stay rooted in all the pieces of who they were. Leo loved the idea of 2 houses like spies. Mia was already imagining themed bedrooms in both. We'll never really move away, Ziora whispered as Minjae wrapped his arms around her. We'll just carry home with us now. He smiled into her neck. As long as I'm with you, I'm already home. He wasn't going to lose her again. And this time, he wasn't going to let the world stand in his way. Minjae returned to his home that night and made calls, decisive ones. His agency protested, networks panicked, but he remained calm, clear. He wasn't retiring. He wasn't disappearing. But the man who once said yes to everything would now say yes only to what mattered. I'll do 1 film a year, stories that deserve time. No more global tours, no more dramas back to back, he told them. I'm not just a public figure, I'm a father now, a husband. They didn't understand. Some would never, but he didn't need them to. It wasn't a sacrifice, it was clarity. For the first time in years, Minjae saw his future, and it wasn't alone. Ziora watched him from across the room as he helped Leo mix paints and braided Mia's hair without flinching. Her heart softened. The man before her wasn't the boy she'd once loved. He was hers. Minjae began working on a new project immediately, an animated short based on 2 siblings who wander into a dreamlike world to find a lost painter. It was tender, raw. His first collaboration would be with Leo, who designed the creatures, and Mia, who voiced the theme melody. Ziora watched them in the soft light of the studio Minjae had transformed in a corner of his art gallery. She didn't say much at first, she was always watching. always thinking, testing the wind to see if it might shift. She had questions too. Your parents, do they know about us now? She asked quietly one evening as they walked the Han River Trail. Min-jae nodded. They know, and I told them they'll meet their grandchildren soon, but only when you say so. She looked away. And if they don't approve? He stopped walking, gently tugging her back to face him. Ziora, I'm not theirs to approve anymore, I'm yours. Her throat tightened. It was the first time in years someone had chosen her out loud. They stood at the edge of the river, cherry blossom petals catching in her braids. He reached for her face like a man memorizing a masterpiece, thumb tracing the lines that time hadn't dimmed. I never stopped painting, he said, but none of it meant anything. Not until now. Tears filled her eyes. We lost so much time, she whispered. He leaned in. We found it again, he answered, brushing his lips against hers. And when they kissed, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was home. The kind of kiss that steadied storms. That pulled 6 years of ache into a single breath and let it go. From the balcony above, Leo and Mia peeked through the curtain, giggling. Outside, the cherry blossoms began to fall. Spring had returned, and this time it was staying. Inside, spring music played softly from Min-jae's old speaker. Mannequins stood displaying Ziora's recent projects. A half-finished dress shimmered on a mannequin. Paintings leaned against the walls. And between it, all 4 beating hearts beginning again. Together. Forever. Epilogue. 5 springs later. In a quiet corner of Songpo-gu, not far from the art museums and cherry blossom paths, stood a house painted in whites and warm earth tones, neither too large nor too modest, but entirely theirs. The soft lull of the Han River shimmered just beyond their window. Ziora's sketches were pinned across the sunroom walls, delicate lines meeting bold patterns in a dance of heritage and haute couture. She had established her sole atelier just blocks away, her designs now gracing global runways while still rooted in West African tradition and Korean elegance. Their lives had rhythm no one with school lunches, coffee-fueled mornings, late-night design edits, and family dinners beneath fairy lights in the garden. And as for Ziora and Min-jae, they had learned to fall in love again slowly. Not with grand gestures, but with everyday choices. His hand on her back during morning rushes. Her kisses before he vanished into a scene. The way their fingers still reached for each other in crowded rooms. Upstairs, Min-jae's studio smelled faintly of oils and cherry tea. Canvases leaned against every surface, some abstract, others intimate. His work had shifted in toneless melancholy, more soul. Since Ziora and the twins returned to Seoul, he'd directed 3 art house films, curated emerging talent, and hosted a mentorship residency. Not to chase fame, but to tell truth. Sometimes, when the world grew quiet, they would sit on the balcony, wrapped in an old quilt, watching the city pulse in soft pinks and blues. This, Min-jae whispered one evening, pulling her close, was always the dream. I just didn't know it yet. Leo, now 10, had become a quiet prodigy in the visual arts. He painted with a maturity that startled even Min-jae, layering emotion and precision like someone who'd lived twice. When one of his concept illustrations was chosen for Min-jae's latest film and featured in the global poster campaign, the art world took notice. A year later, he won a prestigious International Junior Award in Milan for a piece titled 2 Seasons, a powerful depiction of family reunion beneath Seoul's cherry blossoms. Mia, just as passionate in her own right, had discovered her love for gymnastics. Her routines blended elegance and strength, and she brought home her first silver medal with a routine inspired by traditional Korean fan movements. She insisted on calling her team leotards couture sportswear, and occasionally snuck into Ziora's design room to add rhinestones to everything. Outside, spring bloomed again, soft, steady, unapologetically bright, just like them.